From a fuel system its 5 sister ships can never use, to a deployment decision that only makes sense when you understand how the split superstructure works. These are 5 facts about Utopia of the Seas that will surprise you. Utopia of the Seas looks almost identical to the 5 Oasis-class ships that came before it. Same layout, same neighbourhoods, same general silhouette. But underneath, it runs on something completely different. The previous 5 Oasis ships burn heavy fuel oil, the same dense, sulphur-heavy residual fuel large ships have used for a century. Utopia runs on LNG, liquefied natural gas, stored at minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, natural gas becomes a liquid and takes up 600 times less space, which is how you fit weeks of fuel into tanks built into the lower hull. So why didn't the earlier ships use it? Because you cannot retrofit LNG onto an existing vessel. It requires replacing the entire fuel delivery system, cutting open large sections of the lower hull for cryogenic tanks, and recertifying the ship from scratch. On a ship already in service, the cost and disruption make it economically irrational. You do it when you build something new. Utopia was the first Oasis-class ship ordered after Royal Caribbean committed to LNG, so it got the system the others could not. The 5 ships before it will burn heavy fuel oil for the rest of their service lives. The plants in Central Park on Utopia of the Seas did not come from a garden centre. Before the first Oasis-class ship was built in 2009, Royal Caribbean had a question nobody had answered before. Which plants can actually survive on a cruise ship? Not on a balcony. In a full open-air park exposed to salt air, tropical heat, humidity swings and constant low-frequency vibration from the engines below for months at a time, with no opportunity to replace them mid-voyage. They ran tests on their private island, Labadee, in Haiti. Different species were tested under real ocean conditions and they were monitored over time. The ones that survived made it onto the ship. The ones that did not were eliminated. Every tree and plant in Central Park today is there because it passed a field test on a beach in Haiti 15 years ago. The park looks natural and effortless. The selection process was methodical and years long. On deck 8 of Utopia of the Seas, there is a park. Not a rooftop garden, a full open-air park, 328 feet long, 62 feet wide, open to the sky, with thousands of live trees and plants, restaurants and walking paths. It sits in the middle of the ship, not on top, in the middle. This is Central Park, and it should not be structurally possible. A conventional cruise ship is a solid block of steel above the waterline, decks stacked on decks, all connected continuously from one side of the ship to the other. Think of it like a cardboard box. Close it up and you can stand on it. Cut out the middle and both sides collapse. A cruise ship works the same way. That continuous side-to-side structure is what stops a vessel this long from cracking under the forces of a seaway. Remove it, and you need something else to hold the two halves together. To build Central Park, Royal Caribbean split the superstructure in two, a port half and a starboard half, with a 62-foot open gap between them. Bridges and structural members span the void, transferring the loads the missing middle would normally carry. Getting the plants in once the ship was built created its own problem. The gap was too narrow to bring full-grown trees in horizontally. They used a construction crane on a barge to lower them vertically through the open sky. There is a dedicated gardener on board for every sailing. The park is alive at sea because someone figured out how to cut a ship in half and hold it together anyway. Every major cruise ship in history launches on its longest routes first. A new flagship goes on 7-night sailings, the standard for showcasing what the vessel can do and maximising opening revenue. Utopia of the Seas launched on 3-night weekend trips to the Bahamas, the newest, most advanced, most expensive ship in the Oasis class, the shortest possible itinerary. That was not a mistake or a compromise. It was a calculated bet on how the cruise industry actually grows. The industry has a problem it rarely discusses. It depends almost entirely on people who have already cruised. Repeat customers book predictably and spend confidently, but they are a finite group. Growth comes from first-timers, and first-timers are disproportionately hesitant to commit to a 7-night sailing on a ship they have never seen. A 3-night weekend trip is a fundamentally different task. It fits in a long weekend, it costs less, the risk feels smaller. But Royal Caribbean did not use an older ship for those first-timers. They used their newest and best, because a first-time cruiser who boards Utopia of the Seas forms their entire impression of what cruising is from that experience. If the impression holds, they come back. Longer next time, better cabin, with their family. Within a year, Royal Caribbean moved Wonder of the Seas onto the same short cruise format. One ship tested the model, the second confirmed it worked. The elevator panels on Utopia of the Seas do not show the day of the week. They just say, the weekend. That is both the brand and the entire business logic of this ship, compressed into 2 words. Think about what it means. Utopia carries 236,000 tons of steel, a park in the middle, held together by structural bridges, a fuel system its 5 sister ships cannot use, and plants chosen by field trials on a beach in Haiti. It costs over $1 billion to build and hundreds of millions a year to operate. And it runs to the Bahamas and back in 3 days, every week. That only makes sense when you understand what this ship actually is. Not a cruise ship in the traditional sense, but a machine specifically built to convert people who have never cruised into people who will cruise again. Every decision points toward that function. The split superstructure park stops a first-timer in their tracks within minutes of boarding. The LNG engines give the ship a cleaner story to tell. The 3-night route lowers the barrier to saying yes for the first time. And once that first-timer has a strong enough experience on Utopia, they do not just come back to Utopia, they come back to Royal Caribbean on longer itineraries, in better cabins, year after year. The ship that costs the most to build is deployed on the route that produces the most valuable long-term customers. That is not ironic. That is the plan. The weekend is not a marketing line. It is the economics of the entire vessel, printed on an elevator panel. The elevator just says, the weekend. Everything else is the engineering behind that word.